Hey everyone. So today we have a super special video. Today we're going to be looking at the timing of your marriage. So I've tested this technique and it works very, very well. I would say it has maybe like an 80-90% success rate. And so this will work for the majority of you guys that are out there. And there are some exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions. No matter what you do in astrology, there's always going to be exceptions. Um, so this technique will work for 85-90% of you guys. So here's what we do. When you're looking at the chart, uh, there are a couple of key points to look at. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna be looking at the Vimshottari Dasha for the timing of this event. That's the system we're using for this. It's the most common type of timing system that everybody knows. So we're gonna look at that. Um, so there are a few key spots to look in this chart. So first thing, what you want to look at is you want to look at four main houses in this chart. So first step, you want to look at four main houses. The four houses are going to be the Lugna, right? So um, look at four houses, which are going to be the Lugna. Next is the seventh house. This one's a bit more obvious. Lugna, seventh house. Uh, then next is the ninth house, right? So over here, look at the next, look at the ninth house, and then finally the 11th house. 11th house. So these are the main houses that you want to look at in your chart. So first, seventh, ninth, and 11th, right? So why are we looking at these houses? Lugna, this first house, this is you, right? This when anytime the dasha of your Lugna Lord is running, something very important is going to happen, right? So in this case, the Lugna is Sagittarius. So during the dasha of Jupiter, anytime you run the dasha of Jupiter, something super big and super important is going to happen in your life. Now, seventh house, you really want this connection between the first house and seventh house because seventh house is your spouse. So to get married, there needs to be a connection between you and your spouse. And when you see that connection in the dashas, so in this case, the Lugna Lord is Mercury. So if ever you're running the dasha of Jupiter and Mercury, here you know that there's going to be a crossing of energies between you and your spouse. So to get married, you need these two. It's most of the time these two will be running. Now, the ninth house, this one may seem a bit odd, but there's a reason that you look at the D9 chart, the Navamsa chart for marriage. And that's because the ninth house has to do with your punya, your good fortune from past lives. And one such a good fortune is your spouse in this life, or your spouse is your other half, right? So this ninth house will be guiding you and giving you this energy that you've accumulated over all these past lives. So these three are super important in that case. And now the 11th house, when this house is running, this house is super important because this has to do with your gains and success and desires. And most people in the world, have this desire to get married. So some people they're not at a time in their life where they want to get married. And so, in place in the world where you could choose to get married, uh, you know, some people when they're not ready yet or they don't want to get married yet, this 11th house won't be running in conjunction with these other lords here, right? So when this desire is there, when this desire is running, so the Lord here is Venus. So when Venus is running, that desire, there's going to be a desire for something. And when that desire is connected here with Mercury, the seventh Lord, then what's that desire going to be? It's going to be connected with your marriage, right? So in this particular example, right, we are looking for four planets, right? The Dasha of Jupiter, of Mercury, of Sun, who's the lord of the ninth house, and Venus, who's the lord of the 11th house. So these four planets are going to play a super crucial and critical role in timing of this marriage. So the important thing is actually to look at the lord of these houses, right? So they're going to play a super important role. Now, next, what we want to look at is any planets that are actually sitting, so planets sitting in those four houses. So planets sitting in the first house, seventh house, ninth house, and 11th house. First, seventh, ninth, 11th, exact same houses. So these planets will also play a super important role here. So let's say, for example, if when you're doing the timing, normally these four planets are super important to look at. Um, but let's say Rahu comes here, then another super important planet to pay attention to is Rahu, right? Rahu's another super big contender or important factor that will come into play with your marriage, right? So in this example, Rahu is will be important to look at. So these four planets plus Rahu will be important to look at. Now, here's when you know a planet is almost guaranteed to do something. Let's say when we looked at step one, we looked at Jupiter, Mercury, Sun, and Venus, right? So they're the lord of these four houses. What if you saw Jupiter itself sitting in one of these four houses? Let's say if Jupiter was sitting, uh, let's say if Jupiter is sitting here in the ninth house. If Jupiter were sitting here, now you kind of have a double connection where there was a planet where he's a lord of one of these critical houses, and you're connecting the second step. He's also sitting in one of these four houses. So Jupiter plays a critical role here, right? So Jupiter, like you could say, would be super important contender, right? Let's say even if I wanted to, before even going there, let's say even if I wanted to look at more here, so planets sitting here, let's say also if I don't know, let's say Mars was sitting here. Mars would be another planet that's also important to look at. Right now, like I said, we come back here. Jupiter will have priority over everything here because now Jupiter's connecting both of these steps here, right? So that's an important planet, right? Even a similar thing could be said, let's say if let's say Mercury, right? Let's say Mercury is sitting over here. Then you know that again, Mercury's connecting this first step. He's lord of one of these four houses, and he's sitting in one of these four houses. So then you know here Mercury's playing a super critical role. You'll know that somehow you're almost guaranteed to have Jupiter and Mercury play that critical role in the time that these two dashas, these two in particular, are almost guaranteed to be running in this person's marriage, right? So these are the two things that you really want to look at with this. And just as a rule of thumb, that planets to avoid is Saturn and Rahu, or not Rahu, Ketu. Ketu usually is if ever you happen to see like K2 ends up being one of these planets here, like let's say if K2 is Well, K2 will be sitting here. Even though K2 would be sitting in one of these houses, K2 is not a planet who wants to engage in marriage. He's usually detached from all these materialistic things. So it's hard, even though if K2 is here, right, we could put K2 here, but I wouldn't look too deep into this K2 because you really have to work hard to make this K2 uh, uh, be the planet that will bring marriage to. Like K2 would have to have everything working for it to do it. So K2 usually, I would say if K2 is associated, you could put like a minus here because usually K2 it's not going to indicate marriage too often. There are always exceptions, there's always cases, but K2 usually I wouldn't put as a significator here, right? So this is what you look at. So a person here, if you want to guess here, like like let's say if this was a real chart, you would guess that the dasha would have something to do. So Jupiter would be guaranteed. So Jupiter for sure would be connected. Mercury for sure would be connected. And after Jupiter and Mercury, what you would do, you would have to, it would be a toss-up between any of these other planets that we've highlighted here. It could be any one of these. Depending on where these other planets are in the chart, right? But during a Jupiter Mercury dasha, it's going to be a massive, massive chance of marriage, right? So that's the general guidelines. So we're going to look into some examples now, and after this, we're going to see how it actually works in practice. So let's take this person's chart, for example. So here you have all their details. I'm using Jagannath Hora for the charts here. So here's the first thing I always do when looking at the chart, right? If someone asks me when they're going to get married, first thing I look at their date of birth, right? So this person is born at this time. So what I'm going to do here, um, I'm going to say that um, I look at their date of birth, and what I'm going to consider, I know that this person, there's no way they're going to get married at like 5 years old, right? Especially in this modern day and age, right? There's no use in considering like any early ages, right? So what I want to do, I want to start off a little later. What I'll say is that this person, usually in today's day and age, people usually get married at 20 years old and after, as an approximation. Approximately 20 years old and after is when a person will get married. So this person is going to be 20 years old in 1957, right? And onwards. So what I want to do is I want to start when I start the timing, I'm going to look at any dasha that starts around 1957 and onwards. And I'm only going to consider from then on, right? So now when I actually go to the dashas here, right? So I said 1957. Let me move that. So, right, our date was 1957. 1957 and onwards, right? So this is our date that we want to consider. Now, before I actually start the timing, what I want to do is I want to note down, I want to look at the chart and I want to note down those same steps that I showed before, right? So let's look at those four houses. We have the Lugna over here, right? So first step, let's identify the lords of those four houses. So first, right here you have it's Scorpio. So the lord could be either Mars or K2. So I'll say Mars slash K2 here. Though really I'm not like K2, I'm not going to consider as much here, but I'll keep him as a option, I guess. But Mars mostly. Next, I'll look at seventh Lord Venus. Ninth Lord is Moon. So Moon over here. And 11th Lord is Mercury. And actually, you can see Mercury here, the Rashi chart. You can see Mercury is actually in the sign of Moon here, right? So now coming to, I'll keep that in mind for a second, right? So these are the main planets I want to look at. Now, next, I want to look at planets that are sitting in these houses. So next contenders, I have again Rahu, Ketu. Even though again Ketu is the one of the Lugna lords and is sitting in the seventh house, he's not a planet that desires marriage, so I won't consider him as much. Though Rahu is a good contender, is a contender. Next is Venus. Now look how good it is. Venus is the seventh lord sitting in the seventh house, right? So Venus again, we'll put a plus here. So Venus is going to be super important, right? Okay. So that's what we have so far, right? So what I know now is that these are the major contenders for our marriage here, right? And honestly, the big ones I really want to look at, I know that Venus is going to be connected. And remember how I was saying before here that Mercury is actually in Cancer, right? This is a Rashi chart. Here I'm looking at the Bhava Chillit chart, which I always look at. So Mercury is actually sitting in the sign of that, right? So Mercury here, I'll put Mercury. Well, what I'll say here is that Mercury is, I'll give him a plus as well, just for points for sitting in the sign of the ninth house. So these two are going to be connected and are going to do some important stuff. So if I were to guess here, right, look at this. So Moon is the lord of the ninth house, and Mercury is um, in that sign, right? So I would say that there's a strong connection between these two. These guys probably have a big impact to play here. Because again, they're connecting this 11th and the ninth house, right? And then Venus. So I bet these three guys are going to play a big role here. And I'll keep an eye out for Mars, Ra and Rahu, maybe Ketu, I guess, right? So now let's actually start our analysis, right? So let's pick a dasha that's after 1957. So, okay, well, Saturn starts here, right? So I know Saturn, usually what I do, I just look at this date here and then just pick the dasha that's closest. And so Saturn, okay, he's there. I'm not gonna look too much into Saturn here. I'm just gonna start looking if these guys are connected here, right? So let's see when this person was actually born, right? This person was actually born 19th of February, 1964, right? So let's see that. So 1964 falls in this period. Okay, look, Venus. And now 19th February, so that is going to be there. And 19th of February falls in this period here. And look at this connection, right? Venus, Moon, Mercury, right? And look, the actual 19th, right, which is when they got married, falls in the period of Venus again. Right? So look at this connection. You see how big these connections were, Venus, Moon, and Mercury? This essentially is when they got married, right? So that's how you put all the connections, right? It's as if like you built like a circuit here, and when all these guys get connected, right, it completes it, and now the light bulb lights up, and it creates that marriage, right? So these guys were the big guys that were involved in the marriage. Right? So there you go. Even if you didn't want to go all the way down there, right? So let's see, this person, right? How old would they have been? So here they would have been like 27-ish, 26, 27, something like that, right? So when they got married during this time, it makes sense. Um, and there you go. That's how you put it all together. See, so this method is working, right? Let's do another example here, right? But hopefully you see like how this Venus, right? This Venus got involved here twice, right? And that makes sense because he's the Lord. He plays as an important role in step one and two, right? He's the Lord of this house sitting in one of these four houses, right? And then you saw that special connection between Moon and Mercury, right? So Moon, the Lord of this house, and Mercury sitting in that sign. So there's that connection. Okay, let's do another example. Let's do this person, right? So let's follow that same rule again, the same idea. So this person, first thing I'll look at is this. When are they born? So this, right? So if I want to consider their marriage, they're probably going to get married at like around 20 years old or after. So I want to start looking at 1953 and onwards. So I want to start looking at any dasha starting in 1953. Okay, so I got that. Now, uh, okay. Next, let's actually start looking at these houses. So, so step one over here. Let's look at the lords, right? So you have Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. So the planets involved here, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. What I said. And then next are two, any planets sitting here. Okay, now there's a lot going on here. You have Saturn sitting here, right? So Saturn is sitting in there. Now, okay, this is a lot as well. Venus, Sun, Mercury, right? So Venus, Sun, and Mercury, and then Moon, right? So hopefully from here you get an idea of some planets that may potentially play a super important role here, right? You see, Saturn is working overtime here, right? You have that he's here again twice, Venus and Moon, right? So all of these guys, they appear in both of these lists here, right? Also worthy to consider is Mercury, who's debilitated, right? Mercury's in Pisces here, right? The reason I'm considering Mercury is because he's in a special condition, right? He's not, right? Exaltation and debilitation, those are two special conditions, right? He's not in some like ordinary state, right? Something special is happening to him, right? So Mercury as well, we'll keep an eye out for him because he may potentially uh uh play a big role here, right? Any exalted or debilitated planets have a lot of karma associated with it. So something important in life happens during a debilitated or exalted planet's role, right? And well, Venus here is exalted, right? So see when this person got married, 1958, right? So okay, so yeah, we consider Dasha after 1953, so Jupiter Dasha. So we start off there. So already Jupiter is coming into play, right? And look at this, right? One more thing I do want to look at. So Jupiter is the lord of this house, and you have these planets sitting here, right? So if Jupiter is coming into play, then potentially these planets will play an important role too, right? Venus especially, I want to keep an eye out because he may potentially provide a lot here. So 24th of November of 1958. So Saturn. Okay, so see, so that Saturn came into play here, right? So Jupiter, Saturn. Saturn definitely did do something. Now, so Saturn, what else is, oh, yeah, so November 1958. So that is going to be here. So Moon again, and then November 24th. So here, okay. So during this time. So look, this is exactly when they got married. And look at the connections that we have here, right? So we have Jupiter, who again was the ninth lord, and then Saturn, right? So remember how important Saturn, right? Seventh lord sitting in seventh house, right? So Saturn as well playing a super important role here. Saturn coming there, and then Moon, right? Remember I said Moon was super important because he appeared in both of these houses, right? So Moon getting connected here, super important um, over there, right? So Moon playing his role, and what a Mercury, right? Okay, so there's that Mercury, right? I knew it was a good idea to look out for this Mercury because he's debilitated, right? So, okay, so Venus just didn't happen to show up here, right? But you see that these other planets did, right? So all of the guys that we highlighted showed up here, and especially the ones that we paid special attention to, Saturn and Moon. Saturn, Moon, and Mercury especially did come into play a lot, right? So there's another example where the system it works with the timing, right? So let's do one more example here. Same system. If you want to try this out and take a guess, you could pause the video here and, try this analysis out for yourself. But here we go. So let's see, this person, uh, okay, 1934 born. So he's going to be 20 years old at 1954. So we want to consider that. Let's go to the Dashas now. And let's look at the lordships. So Sun, uh, okay, this is good that we're doing this here. Sun, we have Aquarius, which is two rulerships, Mars and Mercury. So Sun is playing an important role. Now with this one, I consider both Saturn and Rahu. So Saturn slash Rahu, either one, and then Mars and Mercury. Mars and Mercury. Now, step two, let's look at planets sitting in these houses, right? So let's look at over here. So the planet sitting here, so Venus, okay? So I'm looking at this Bhavachlit chart here. So Venus sitting in the ninth house, super important, right? So let me highlight that. Then I'm looking at this Bhavachlit chart here, which I would always recommend looking for proper houses. So Venus is sitting there. Okay, now Mercury. Okay, Mercury is the lord of this house, and he's actually sitting there. So Mercury is good to look at in that chart. Okay. So those are the planets that are really sitting there, right? Um, okay. So I also do, again, when looking at the sign here, you see that Venus is sitting in his own house, and then ninth lord Mars sitting with Venus. So this is Venus and Mars, right? This Venus might play a pretty important role here because you have ninth lord sitting in Venus's sign, right? So Venus here, I want to pay close attention to that Venus. Now, so 1954, so okay, Saturn Dasha. So okay, so they're already starting at Saturn's Dasha here. And when do they get married? 1963, February. So okay, that's during this time. So Venus Dasha, and then at the end here, Mercury, and what is this? The 16th. That here, February 16th. Uh, okay. So this is approximately when this person got married. 16th of February 1963, right? So I am there. So, right, and look at the planets that we highlighted. So it was Saturn. It was during the Saturn Dasha, right? Which makes sense because yeah, they're they're in their 20s during this time. Um, and then after, right, look at the planets that we highlighted, Venus and Mercury. See, they came in here, right? So even if you wanted to do an approximate, let's say even if you didn't know beyond that, like this is still a good like approximation. If you didn't know exactly and you wanted to say, okay, you'll get married somewhere between end at the end of 1962, start of 1963, this is still a good period to like take a guess with, right? Like that's still a good enough answer to give to a client or, if you want to look at for yourself, right? So and then Saturn came back again for a second time, right? So you see like those are the planets that are like really like playing a huge role here. Right? So every single time, right? And look, we're not looking at a planet like we didn't even look at Jupiter here, right? We didn't consider him at all in our thing, and right, he didn't show up, right? So it looks like all these other none of these other planets are showing up. Only the ones that we're focusing on are generally the planets that are showing up here. Um, and there you go. So those are some examples. I hope this helps you with your analysis. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions with your own timing, leave a comment down below. And if you want to share when you actually got married, you can share your dates and when you got married. Usually I would use this for a first marriage, but it probably I think I've seen this working with a second and third marriage as well. So if you want to leave some example timings down below, that'd be appreciated. And thank you.